Palm Beach, Florida is the scene of what may be the most publicized legal battle in our nation's history, and everyone wants to know the next move.
The attorneys that I talked to all said that they felt that her strategy was backfiring.
It's the overall scenario he's trying to create, that this was all consensual.
John Scott takes you inside the courtroom for the latest in the William Kennedy Smith rape trial.
2, 1. Zoom in, camera 1.
They were college sweethearts, though her father wouldn't let them marry. But nearly 3 decades later, they meet again.
It was like coming home, finally.
Now, after 27 years, wedding bells.
Swiss is in. Chicago, we're coming to you first.
Audio check, 1, 2.
Then to LA.
Girl, you know it's true.
They were the toast of the music industry until they were found out. And even Milli Vanilli seemed to think it was funny. But nobody's laughing now that one of the duo is recovering from a suicide attempt.
Stand by.
Hello, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching Inside Edition today. You know, things have really fallen fast for pop stars Milli Vanilli. They're at the top, selling millions of records and winning a Grammy. Then the lip sync scandal, and now a suicide attempt. We'll have the very latest in just a few moments. But first up today, the trial that everybody is watching. Did William Kennedy Smith commit rape, and will he go to jail? Millions of dollars are being spent defending Smith, and John Scott joins us now from Florida with an inside look at the trial. John.
Bill, it is, depending on your point of view, either the most fascinating courtroom drama in the nation at this moment, or perhaps the most overblown, overcovered media event in recent memory. But for the two people in the middle of it all, it is a very sad and very personal drama. And it may come down to the word of Willie Smith against his accuser, a woman who says that he attacked her and raped her at the Kennedy compound less than a year ago. In court on this first day, the major ruling, the judge saying that she will not allow testimony from 3 other women who say that Smith attacked them in the past. That is a victory for Smith's side and a blow for the prosecution. It's prosecutor Moira Lash's biggest case ever, and there are those court watchers who say that up to this point, she's blowing it.
The attorneys that I talked to all said that they felt that her strategy was backfiring, that what she was doing was alienating the judge.
Early on, Lash claimed that Judge Mary Lupo was making faces at her and tried to have her thrown off the case. Lash also waved a book in court about Senator Ted Kennedy and Chappaquiddick.
When you begin to see things slipping away a little bit, there are lawyers who become frantic, and you do frantic things.
Lash's style is being called stiff and transparent, like shatterproof glass, very unlike the emotional account of the alleged rape victim.
All I know is he tackled me, and then he had my dress up and his hands in my pants, and he raped me. I had his shoulders, and I was trying to get out from underneath him, and I couldn't. He was too big or too strong.
3 other women allege Willie sexually assaulted them in previous years. Judge Lupo says they cannot testify, but their stories may surface if Willie takes the stand and says he's never raped anyone. Then prosecutor Lash may be able to attack his credibility with these other charges. From a former Georgetown medical student.
Without any warning, he grabbed me by the wrists, threw me over the couch, and I landed on the floor on my back, pinned to the floor by his wrist, with him on top of me.
From another former Georgetown graduate student.
I realized I can't fight at this point. He's going to hurt me, and I could see it in his face. He was such a ferocious, almost an animal-like kind of look to him. It was just horrible.
And from a former girlfriend of one of Willie's cousins.
He stayed on top of me. He put all his weight on me, and he tried to kiss me. And he put his hands on my breasts and up my dress.
If this case was properly presented with a good, tough prosecution, and this other evidence of these other girls comes out, I believe Willie is going to be in bad trouble.
Willie Smith's legal ace is Roy Black. His style is being called a velvet fist, soothing but tough. Defending Willie could cost $1 million for lawyers, investigators, public relations, even hiring a jury expert, Kathy Bennett.
Lucky to have her on my side.
In court, Black may shock jurors with what he calls the single most important evidence, the alleged victim's lacy bra and panties, just like these from Victoria's Secret. Black says the accuser's lingerie isn't ripped because she was willing to have sex, and no rape ever took place.
It's an overall syndrome, a scenario he's trying to create, that this was all consensual.
Polishing the Kennedy image reportedly includes a family ban on drinking and dating during the trial. Meanwhile, damaging the woman accuser's credibility could win the case. Jack Cole takes the pulse of Palm Beach on the radio. He says the talk of the town is leaning against the young woman.
A woman who cannot remember, in the context of a date with a man that she's just met, how her pantyhose were removed, is, you know, not very well positioned to tell a story of date rape.
The proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt to convict William Kennedy Smith. Some courtroom observers are saying the testimony of those three women is vital to the state's case, and without it, the advantage definitely goes to William Kennedy Smith. Bill?
John, are there any circumstances under which those women might be allowed to testify in the future?
Well, some are saying that it is possible that if Willie Smith takes the stand and if he talks about specific events in his past life, the prosecution may be able to put those three women on the stand to rebut elements of his stories. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, so what you're saying is if Smith goes on the stand and says, hey, I'm a great guy, I have a clean record in my past, then those women might be allowed to rebut that and say what happened to them, what they're claiming. What are the odds that Smith will take the stand?
It would seem to me and to a lot of the people around here that he is going to have to take the stand simply because this case is going to come down to his word against hers. She definitely will be on the stand. Most people think he will have to be also.
John Scott in Florida, thank you for that report. And still a lot more to come as Inside Edition continues for you. The tragic fall of Milli Vanilli gets more tragic. And it took 30 years, but love finally conquered all.
If you really want something and you know how important it is, never give up. Go after it.
We first introduced you to Itzhak and Marie last week. The couple met in college, fell in love, but could not marry. Well, now, almost 30 years later, there is a very happy ending to this very special romance. Scott Rappaport with an Inside Edition follow-up.
When they first thought about getting married, the Beatles were all the rage. Lyndon Johnson was in the White House, and they were a couple of college sweethearts from Connecticut. He called her his little Appassionata after their favorite Beethoven sonata. But even though it was love at first sight, it took them 27 years to get to the altar.
If you really want something and you know how important it is, never give up. Go after it. You'll pay the price. So who knows, at the end, you may get what you want.
The price they paid was over a quarter of a century of separation. Their time apart had begun painfully. Marie's father didn't think Itzhak's teaching aspirations were good enough for his daughter. So without questioning, Marie delivered the tragic news to Itzhak. She was marrying someone else.
I'll never forget his reaction. He had never been really rough with me at all, but he grabbed me by the back of my hair, and he drew me to him, and he kissed me very roughly. And he looked at me with really hard eyes and said, well, I dare you to find a man that'll ever kiss you like that again.
After that moment, they vanished from each other's lives. Marie married the man her father wanted her to and moved to Florida. She had 3 daughters before divorcing and building a highly successful kennel business on her own. Itzhak stayed in Connecticut, married, and had 2 children. Eventually, he too divorced. Both of them were leading full lives, but something was missing. Because through all the years, the marriages and the children, the love between Itzhak and Marie never died.
But, you know, there was always that lingering little thing gnawing at the back of your head. There was always that maybe, someday, maybe.
I always spoke of Itzhak to my children as, you know, that legendary man who got away. You know, the one that your heart always belongs to.
Then last April, with her father gone, Marie hired a private investigator to find her lost love. It took only 6 phone calls to locate him and discover that he was just as eager to reestablish contact as Marie was.
So I hesitantly said, hello.
We spoke for about 2 or 3 minutes.
And he picked up on my nervousness right away.
Once I asked her...
Do you remember your nickname in college?
I used to know a little girl by name of Passionata. Do you know her?
Well, that told it all.
It worked magic. It was absolute magic.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Within hours of their reunion, Istok proposed. And yesterday, they became husband and wife.
You may kiss the bride.
She still is little Appassionata, make no mistake about it. She hasn't changed one bit.
But this love story has more than one happy ending. For Bob Stewart, the detective who brought them together, it's renewed his faith in people.
Usually I'm in divorce cases or child custody, and this one has started a whole new side of my business that I never had before.
This is my daddy.
What do you think of him?
Love him.
Out of this union, Marie's daughters finally have the father they always wanted. And for Marie, she's finally with the man who got away.
Without your better half, you're really living a half existence. We are a complete family now.
And along with their new marriage, Itzhak and Marie are beginning new lives. They are both going back to school. Coming next, the sad case of Milli Vanilli. A suicide attempt is the latest shocker.
His family in Germany had been harassed, and the only way out of this was what he was doing. It was taking his own life.
Ever since it was revealed that pop singers Milli Vanilli did not really sing on some of their recordings, things have been going south fast for the duo. First, they lost their Grammy, and now something much worse has happened. Nancy Glass is here with our story. Nancy.
Bill, Milli Vanilli didn't just give up their Grammy and slink off into the sunset. For the past year, they have told people they were working with a voice coach and planning a comeback. They said they would prove that they really can sing. Well, maybe that was all for show, because over the weekend, one member attempted suicide.
Recently, it seemed that Milli Vanilli weren't losing sleep over their lip-syncing scandal. They even parodied themselves in this commercial for Carefree Gum.
How long? Till these guys sing for themselves.
But over the weekend, one half of the duo, 27-year-old Rob Pilatus, seemed to be in anything but a lighthearted mood. It was at this hotel in Los Angeles early Saturday morning that police found him ready to take his life.
He was hanging on by his hands on this railway here. I yelled up to him, and I told him, no, you didn't want to do this.
At 4:55 a.m., Rob Pilatus made a call to the offices of the Los Angeles Times to have a reporter take down his last words. Receptionist Jerry Wing answered the phone.
I could tell by his voice this man was no shape at all. And I went to question him, and he said, oh, please. He said, just put me through. This is an emergency. So
an editor from the paper contacted local deputies who quickly arrived on the scene and found him on the balcony of room 910 of the Le Mondrian Hotel on Sunset Boulevard, drugged, bleeding, and threatening to jump 120 feet to his death.
We then formulated a plan where we could gain entry into room 909 next door. And once we were set in position in room 909, our station desk telephoned Mr. Pilatus' room, and as Mr. Pilatus left the balcony to answer the telephone, we then walked across the balcony into the room and detained him.
Pilatus was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and placed under 24-hour observation. Rob Pilatus is the Milli Vanilli member who seemed to have the most problems after he was labeled as a fraud and stripped of his Grammy Award. A month after the scandal was revealed, he was arrested and investigated for sexual battery.
You didn't do it. You didn't do it.
What?
You were charged with sexual battery.
Really?
But he was never charged, and he and his Milli Vanilli partner, Fab Morvan, were trying to start over. But perhaps the pressures of being deserted by the music industry and his fans were just too much to bear.
Girl, you know it's true. I love you.
Rob Pilatus told the LA Times that he was constantly approached by former fans who were angry that they had been duped. And even tougher for him was that his family back in Germany was getting harassed as well. Bill?
Thanks, Nancy, for that report. And when we come back after a short break, Ralph Nader on why the government deep-sixed a safe car. Ralph Nader in a moment, but first here's what's upcoming on Inside Edition.
Who is turning houses of worship into unholy infernos?
The whole top portion of the entire center building was in blazes at that time.
Tomorrow, Inside Edition investigates these profane attacks on sacred places.
It's like having a person die before your eyes. This person is either very hate-filled or very sick individual.
Don't miss tomorrow's Inside Edition.
They're trying to destroy places of worship.
That's tomorrow. And finally today, it was supposed to be the safest car ever built in America. Then why was it destroyed by our own government? We asked Ralph Nader to look into this very disturbing story.
The safest cars ever built in America.
As an automobile, they're ridiculous.
They're talking about the same car, the RSV, or Research Safety Vehicle. It's the most valuable safety experiment on wheels. Our government spent $30 million to develop 20 of these futuristic vehicles in the 1970s. Like them or not, they proved Americans can get safety and fuel economy in the same small car. Now, RSV could stand for Recently Scrapped Vehicle. After years of sitting in the garage of the Transportation Department gathering dust, the government this summer crash-tested the last 4 of their historic cars and then had them shredded.
It was a political assassination, not a scientific test. Today, the Department of Transportation is fighting increased fuel economy standards. And their argument is that you can't build fuel-efficient cars that are safe.
We know that this small car, like all small cars, has to be lighter to be economical. But of course, that also means less protection.
The research safety vehicles destroyed that argument.
Equipped with airbags, foam-filled body panels, and thick interior padding, passengers could walk away from high-speed crashes in the small RSVs, which got up to 32 miles per gallon.
They're a thorn in the side of the agency, and so they had to get rid of them.
Don Friedman hoped the slick subcompact he designed would inspire future engineers to build even safer cars. His dream was taking hold this April when engineering students began studying the RSVs after they were towed to the University of Virginia for educational purposes. But the cars didn't stay there for long. Weeks later, the government shipped them to an Ohio test site to be crashed and scrapped.
They just tested them, and without any knowledge of any of the people who knew anything about the car. None of the technical people who were responsible for the design and development of the vehicle were involved in the testing.
Incredibly, a dummy wasn't even used in this 50-mile-per-hour crash. The Transportation Department at first refused to go on camera. They sent us this letter instead. It says the cars were destroyed at the direction of government auditors. But that's not what the auditors told us.
It's my understanding that they went to the University of Virginia for additional research.
When the Transportation Department learned about our talk with the auditors, they suddenly agreed to an interview. So why were the RSVs taken from Virginia and destroyed?
And it was my opinion that having them down at the University of Virginia for young engineers to study was not a good use for those vehicles. For one thing, as I said, as an automotive safety engineer, I thought they were kind of silly.
Silly? The Smithsonian Institution in Washington considered the RSV for its permanent auto collection, but couldn't find room. Later, the museum suggested the Department of Transportation build its own collection around the RSV. But preserving the RSV was the last thing the government wanted to do. We asked if the disposal of the cars had anything to do with the debate over fuel economy.
Say that there was no link in our mind between the two.
Still, the suspicion lingers for Don Friedman, and he tries to be philosophical about the destruction of his research safety vehicle.
As long as people can understand the value of the program and the value of incorporating its features in current cars, then it won't be lost.
We have not heard the last of the research safety vehicle, Government auditors say they will be looking into the circumstances surrounding the destruction of the RSVs by the Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Ralph. And that's it for us today. Thanks again for watching Inside Edition. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Hope to see you again tomorrow.